Hello YouTube, what is happening? No, God, I still hate this intro. I don't know how to start these videos. It's the second video and I still don't know what I'm doing. Let's just start. Okay, last time I talked about the fact that I'm going to buy a harpejji. Well, in fact, I've already bought a harpejji. It should be here in about a month. Last time I talked about all the things that I liked about the instrument, all the possibilities, and what I was excited about and made me buy it in the first place. Today I'm going to talk about some of the reservations that I've got. I'm still not entirely sure if this is going to be the instrument for me. And I'm going to share some of the gremlins that are still floating around in the back of my mind. Let's do it. There aren't that many harpejjis in the world at the moment. They are becoming more popular, but they're not in shops in the UK, where I live. They're made in the US. There was no way for me to try the instrument, no way for me to hear one in person before I had to make the decision whether I was going to buy one or not. So that obviously makes it a little bit of a gamble. You can try and do your research, you can take your best guess, but at the end of the day, the first time I play the harpejji will be the day that it arrives on my doorstep. Harpejjis are not cheap instruments. They're boutique instruments, they're made by a small team in the US. The instrument I'm having made is also a custom instrument, so it's going to be completely unique, it will be one of a kind, and that does not come cheap. Additionally, because I'm not in the US, I've got to factor in things like import taxes, and the cost will run into thousands of pounds. That's quite a lot to invest in an instrument that you've never played before. The second concern about the harpejji arises out of the nature of the instrument. I mentioned before, it's kind of like a hybrid of a piano and a guitar. It's kind of laid out like a piano, it's very visual, you play it in a sitting position like you would with a piano, but basically it's guitar strings on a piece of wood with pickups. And for all the possibilities that it affords for piano players, one concern I have is whether it will just end up being a slightly different way of making guitar type noises. Now I hope it won't be, and I think with the technique of playing it and using two hands at once on the instrument, you'll be able to do things that guitarists just can't do. But will that be distinct enough to give it a voice in its own right and make it completely different from a guitar? We'll have to see. It's difficult when you're watching other people playing to know whether things that you hear in the sound are because of their technique or whether it's something fundamental in the instrument itself. One of my concerns is about legato. Legato just means being able to move smoothly from one note to the other without any break in between. Now it looks relatively easy to do that on the harpejji when the notes are either on the same string or are very close together, but I think the technique of trying to make a legato sound when you're spanning several strings could be quite difficult. But some of the videos I've seen and some people who've played it sound a bit choppy to me and they don't get a very smooth legato. So I'll have to see whether that's just a technique issue or it's something fundamental about the instrument. Only time will tell. Articulation. Articulation is the way that you strike a note to get a certain sound out of it. So you can make a long sound, you can make a short sound, staccato for the musicians out there. And also accenting. By hitting notes at slightly different volumes on the piano, then you can get different sounds. I think it's going to be okay on the harpejji, because from what I can see, there is quite a lot of dynamic range that you can adjust by how hard or softly you strike the strings. But I'm not 100% so sure about articulation. As a jazz player, I'm probably going to want to play some jazz on the harpejji, and I wonder if you're going to be able to get those accents smoothly and fluently enough to give you a proper swing feel. It's impossible to determine that until I get my hands on the instrument myself. So that one's a real leap of faith, and I've just got to kind of trust that from what I've seen in terms of the dynamic range and the bits and bobs that I've heard, that it's going to work out. This next one's more about me as a person than it is about the harpejji as an instrument. I already play the piano. I've been playing pro for a good few years. I'm okay. I'm pretty good. I don't know if I've got the patience to be a beginner again, and whether I'm going to have the patience to do what I want to do with the harpejji. Will I get frustrated? Will I just find myself transitioning back to piano because the things that I want to do musically are so much easier for me to realise instantly at the keyboard than they are at the harpejji? Now, one of the big selling points of the harpejji for me was that it looks pretty easy to transition from piano. The visual layout of the instrument, the technique of playing it, suggests that if you're already a piano player, then hopefully it will give you a bit of a leg up, a bit of a head start when you start with the harpejji. I'm hoping that if that's the case, then I'll be able to make at least a pleasing sound pretty quickly, and that'll give me the enthusiasm to carry on. But I really wouldn't fancy now trying to learn trombone or saxophone or a woodwind instrument, something that I've got no experience of playing in the past, and I don't want to go back to being a beginner with those again. So whether I've got the patience to stick with it or not, we'll have to see. That's not the fault of the harpejji, that's just me. But hey, nobody's perfect. The harpejji's got 12, 16 or 24 strings depending on which model you buy. I've gone for the K24, which is the biggest instrument with the most strings. Tuning 24 strings sounds like it could take a while, but it does look pretty easy, and I've seen a few videos, both from Marconi themselves and other players, that show the process. You get a tuning tool that allows you to move the adjuster at the base of the string, and using an electronic tuner, it should be relatively easy and quick to get the instrument in tune. However, if it's going out of tune a lot, and it requires a lot of tuning, then that could be a pain in the neck. Having to stop what you're doing every couple of minutes and retune 24 strings could be problematic. However, from what I've seen, they do hold their tune pretty well, and they don't need too much adjustment. So I'm hoping that it's 5 to 10 minutes, get the instrument in tune before you start your session, and then you're good to go for the next couple of hours. Obviously, it's going to depend on how much you do things like bending strings, just like a guitar. The more you bend them, then they'll go out of tune. But fingers crossed, from what I've seen, the tuning process doesn't look as bad as you might think. Buying an instrument from a different country that you can't buy in any UK shops, that no one's really familiar with, means that maintenance could potentially be an issue. The team at Marconi have been great so far throughout the order process, and I'll do another video once I've got my instrument about the whole transaction, from me initially contacting them about the instrument to the instrument arriving. And I feel confident from my interactions with them so far that if there were any problems, they'd be able to help me through it. The second thing is that because it is a different instrument, but it is very like a guitar, then you might be able to get local guitar technicians to be able to help you with any instruments relating to fretting, string height, those kind of things. So although it's not a common instrument, a good guitar technician can probably help you with any fine-tuning or minor adjustments that are needed. There's not much that can go wrong with a harpejji. Just like a guitar, it's essentially a string strapped to a bit of wood with a pickup transmitting the vibration from the string to the amplifier. Unless you damage it or drop it or break it in some way, then there's not much that can go wrong. So I'm not anticipating that there are going to be too many problems. But again, it's just one of those things that's a little niggle in the back of my mind. I'm buying this thing from the US. Nobody here makes them. What happens if there's an issue? So those were a few of the concerns that I had, and still have, about the harpejji. Obviously they weren't enough to put me off completely, because I have decided to go for the instrument, and it's going to be on its way very soon. When it does arrive in the future, I'll be able to update you and let you know if I've had any of these problems, or if any of my concerns were founded or not. It wasn't enough to put me off though, and I've gone for it. So if you're interested, or you share any of these concerns yourselves, then stick around, subscribe to the channel, and I will let you know how I get on. That's quite a lot to invest in an instrument that you've never played before. Nice one, dickhead. Can we go to the pub? I've had enough. Can we go to the pub?